Good morning, class. Now we're going to start here a chapter that follows just naturally from digestion. We'll look at, we left the story off with how you absorb amino acids and monosaccharides and water and fats into your body from your gut. And now we're going to see what makes an adequate diet, how do we burn it, how many calories do we burn, things about your basic spreadsheet, how many calories in, how many calories out. So we'll cover all that now, and I'm sure a lot of you are interested in this. Some of you are nutrition minors, and so you've delved deeply into parts of today's lecture. And exercise, nutrition, go hand in hand when you're looking at your body health. So I have one more chapter after this. I'm going to give you a reproduction lecture. But this one, we're going to do a little bit of review. If you had me last semester looking at carbs, proteins, lipids, the different types and such. So we'll go over that again and how much you need of each in a healthy diet. And then some of they're not minor, they're necessary for life, but you need much smaller amounts. You need minerals and vitamins. So we'll do a broad overview of that. And we'll see what you do with these nutrients, how much calories you need to survive and do other activities. And we'll end up talking about healthy eating and starvation and obesity and topics related to your overall diet and nutrition. All right. So what do we do? Why do we eat at all, right? If we were plants, we could just sit in the sunlight, take in carbon dioxide, take in water, minerals from the soil, and just make our own sugars. But we can't. We steal all of our energy from plants or other animals that ate plants. So plants, again, are the bottom rung of our food chain. They're necessary to fuel all the rest of life on the planet. So we need the fuel, the nutrients for our calories. We've got to burn them to power every chemical reaction that we've been talking about. Every reaction in your body, your muscles, your neurons, and the running the pumps of all of your cells. You need ATP, and thus you need energy to power all that. We also need these raw materials to grow, to make a baby, to repair ourselves, to make antibodies. All these things we need raw materials, so they need to come in. If we've taken too many raw materials, we'll store that as fat. And too little, we'll end up, see how we start breaking down our own normal tissues in order to survive. So there's going to be that balance there, just like we did with the whole electrolytes and fluids, water in, water out. Same thing with calories and the different types of nutrients. So a nutrient is simply the chemicals that we bring in for survival, right? And I hear a lot, it drives me crazy, people talking about, I won't have that because it has chemicals in it. And I think there's bad chemicals and good chemicals. I mean, we're made up of chemicals, that's it. I see things, margarine's just one molecule away from an ingredient in paint thinner or something like that. And yeah, I mean, carbon dioxide is one molecule away from carbon monoxide, which is deadly. I mean, I want natural chemicals, not artificial. Chemicals don't know the difference. They're chemicals, right? There can be other ingredients that come in with artificial or natural, but again, it's just words used incorrectly by people that don't understand science, right? So you guys take in chemicals, you use the chemicals, you are chemicals. Macronutrients on the big scale, right? These are what you need, the carbs, proteins, and fats. These are that make up the main part of your diet. Then the micronutrients be those vitamins and minerals that are necessary for life, but you just need a small amount of iron and cobalt and even aluminum, little things like that, just tiny amounts. But God, you need them for those certain enzymes that require them. And if you don't have them, you're going to have deficiencies and issues are going to come up. Whenever you hear essential nutrients, essential amino acids, the word means you have to take them into your diet. You can't make them yourselves. All right? There's going to be 20 amino acids in your that you use in life, and 8 or 9 are going to be essential. And that means you need, all of them are essential. You need all 20 for life, but you can't make those 9. So that's why they're termed essential. So that's what that term means. It's not exactly make sense on its own, but now you guys understand. This looks like a school lunch, right? And you guys with your educated eyes, you can look it over, you notice, you see, well, that's be a lot of carbs there, starches, complex carbs in those potatoes, right? You must source a lot of calories. It'd be that cookie, of course. It's the best part, but it's also, it has a lot of fat in it, right? You know, it's made with butter, and it's got flour like that. So that's also got some fats and some simple sugars, complex sugars, right? And the fruits also has sugars in it, simple sugars made by the plant. And there'll be roughage, things you can't digest because it's a plant. And then these, I'm assuming they're chicken, who knows what it could be, but you know, yourself know that's what's going to have the protein in it, some fat. It's always been fried, so the breading is going to have the oil it was fried in. And then look at the peas, you say to yourself, okay, that looks healthy there. And that's going to have also some roughage because it's a plant material you can't digest, but it's going to have some protein in there and water and vitamins, things like that. So you look at this to an uneducated person in nutrition, it would just be a cookie, what tastes good, what it tastes like. But you know, looking at all these items, they're going to turn into this milkshake-like material in your stomach and your intestines, and then you will take out of it the digested, the broken down parts of all of these foods. So you could make a spreadsheet and a tally of what kind of nutrients, the amounts that come from all of this, because it's all going to be brought together in your digestive system. Yeah. And I say educated. Also, you guys, I don't know, just as an aside, a lot of times you think of this education as a way to get a job, and it is, and I understand that. You're like, well, you know, to be athletic trainer, to be a dental hygienist, I need so much education until they give me this job and this salary. And that's true. That is absolutely true. But also education gives you a different outlook on life. You see life differently, a person that has this college education and not. It doesn't have to be college, but just educated in the world. And so, you know, you see this play differently than someone that doesn't have that background knowledge. Just like you've taken A&P and you understand a lot more about the body and functioning. So as you go out in your life, you understand more than the person that hasn't taken these classes, and even classes that you're kind of forced to take. You know, art appreciation, etc. Like, well, how's that going to help me? Well, in your life, you'll see the world differently. I think richer. You see life in more depth, and be able to understand more when you know the literature, the art, even beside the I want about kinetics and athletic training, whatever your major happens to be. So, as an aside, in this education, you come out of it before you know it, before you actually realize it, you have a broader and deeper knowledge of the world, and so that's its usefulness. Listen to me, see? You need these kind of talks from me. School lunches around the world, too, you can see quite different. You look at Finland, I imagine, looks like a lot of root vegetables, and I see probably a lot of seafood, fish. Ukraine, I see sausages and potatoes. Italians, I see bread and fruit. Yeah. So what I want you to do is notice that there are many ways that we can get the proper nutrients in the world. We have your diet differs a lot from some people you know, right? And the bottom line is if you're getting enough of these essential nutrients and enough calories, you can get your diet from many different sources, right? And I just show, if you think about the difference between someone living up in the Arctic versus someone living in the rainforest, what difference? What food is available if you lived in, the north border of Alaska? There's not fresh vegetables. No, I mean, they're going to eat a lot of fat and a lot of protein. That kind of animal protein is going to be in their diet, and they're able to survive. A vegetarian without any meat at all, or a vegan where you're serious about that. You'll see vegetable protein is not complete outside of soybeans, so you need to make sure you get a varied diet. And there's just a few issues too. We'll talk about vegetarianism. I just want a picture of sushi, one of my favorites. That's a beautiful thing right there. And look at that. Who doesn't feel comfort in this pasta, meatballs, etc.? So around the world, I realize people get their nutrients in different ways. Asian countries, rice kind of is the backbone as compared to look at Eastern Europeans, maybe more grains and potatoes, things like that. And so there's various ways to fulfill our nutrients. And you go, oh, I am impressed. You go to Market Basket or even Hannaford, etc. You look at their fruit selection. It's pretty good for living in Maine that we have it every single day. Fresh oranges available. You know, it's just amazing what we can do. But you go to a market in Brazil and you see fruits, wide variety. You know, you're not tied to bananas, apples, pears, certain things. So people around the world get quite different diets. Does anyone know what this is? It's a bad Pauly Shore movie, if you want to look it up. But this is Biosphere 2. And it was created out in the desert in Arizona. And the idea was to help to see if we could live on Mars, etc. But it's self-contained. So they were going to make all the food and even like all the oxygen, everything in this one like space capsule. It was sealed off from the atmosphere. And it turned out, I'll give you the punchline, it was a huge, huge mistake, or it just did not work out very well. And the people inside ended up, the food system didn't work as they thought, and so they had less food, they had to ration it. And when you don't have food, you get hangry, right? You get a little cranky, and turns out the people in there, they were locked together, and like it says there, they didn't talk to each other. So the whole social part of it is fascinating. But I bring this up because in terms of what can you do to extend your life, how can you live the longest? Well, obviously don't smoke, eat a healthy diet, exercise. But the one thing that's really shown is calorie deprivation. Certainly in mice, what they do is they have one group they feed ad libitum, as much food as they want, they feed on their own. Another group is calorie restricted, where they give them just enough that they need. And that group always lives longer, lives substantially longer. So there's a group of people out there that eat the minimum amount of calories. They're weighing every little piece of grapefruit and everything. And I've seen a special, they don't look good. They don't look happy. Let me just say that. And, if you're going to, for me, if I'm going to be able to live another year or enjoy my life eating food, I'm going to choose the former. So, but just letting you know, there is a group that eats the minimum amount of calories to survive, and they don't have a lot of extra energy, but it's a thing. And we measure the energy in food as a calorie, all right? And actually, a big C means 1,000 small c calories. And we'll see 1 calorie is a measure of heat. Actually, the amount of heat it takes to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree, or 1 milliliter of water 1 degree. All right, interestingly here, we'll talk about 2 hormones here. I mean, in this chapter, another 2 hormones that are important is insulin and glucagon, right? After a big meal, your sugar is going to increase in your blood, and insulin will be released. It'll cause the sugar to be brought into the cells and stored. And between meals, glucagon comes off, and that's going to release the stored sugar to keep your glucose levels stable. So, but here's 2 more hormones I want you to know about. Ghrelin. Ghrelin is released when you are hungry. Okay, it's released, comes from cells in your stomach wall. It's released in the blood, and your center for thirst and hunger is in your hypothalamus. And there's something called neuropeptide Y. And when that hits that hunger center, it's going to make you seek out food and eat food. Okay. Now, on the other hand, when you're full, when you're obese, etc., when your body feels like it has enough calories, the hormone is leptin. And leptin comes from fat cells. Epidocytes are fat cells. So the more fat cells you have, the more leptin. And leptin inhibits that neuropeptide Y. So the more fat cells you have, the more you inhibit your hunger. Yeah. And so you can see these two hormones are going to try to keep that balance of your appetite and your hunger, to keep your calories, because you want calorie input output to be the same, because if you don't get enough calories, you're going to lose body mass. If you get too many calories, you're going to grow in fat. And so there is this balance. And of course, it's looked at under a microscope now because of the obesity issues. And you may say to yourself, Parmalee, we just need leptin pills, right? It's going to reduce your hunger or block ghrelin. It's a good example. And that's it. Oh, I know. I wish it was that simple. And in terms of, there's actually a small percentage, like 5 or 10% of people, it actually works to give them leptin because they have a genetic problem where they don't make leptin. So they just keep eating too much, right? But it's quite complex. Besides that genetic problem, just like I mentioned with Parkinson's, you can give dopamine, but your body adjusts to it. And so it's quite complicated. I just want to remind you that a lot of pets are obese. Yeah, I won't get into that though. So why can't we just work with these hormones? It seems like the perfect place. It will decrease your appetite if you just take leptin. Well, as complicated as the answer. You can see women are more sensitive than men to it, other things. And it will work. Okay, so leptin is given in those just a small percentage of cases that the obesity is a result of leptin issues. And the other thing is sleep. When you guys don't get enough sleep, you will eat more. You can see that. And also it's thought, high fructose corn syrup, you've heard it has a lot of issues, bad things people will attribute to it. And one thing we're talking about, if you have leptin resistance, and so that you release leptin, you shouldn't eat more, but your body doesn't listen to it. Indeed. And another interesting thing is with gastric bypass, the kind where they remove part of the stomach. Well, for one thing, I won't get into it, but it often cures diabetes. Yeah, cures diabetes. And there's some ideas why. But also you have less stomach tissue, less ghrelin will be secreted, less hunger. So it's another byproduct. So what I want you to take home from it is that we have these two hormones that influence our hunger, where they come from, stomach cells or fat cells, and that unless you have a genetic problem with leptin, the answer is not, can we give you leptin to make you feel full? Yeah, and then it's hidden behind me, but proteins and carbs and fats differ in how much in your diet differ in how much ghrelin is going to be released, or leptin. All right, so nutrients. I won't read that for you down there, but these are the things we consume. And besides the obvious, carbs and proteins, we need water, we need minerals, vitamins. All these things are brought into our bodies, and they're necessary for our survival, for our energy, for our repair, everything that we need in our body. Water, absolutely essential. We're over 60% water. Remember, males and females differ a little bit in that, because males have generally greater muscle mass, so generally more water. And it also changed from a baby to being elderly, having less and less water make up your body. But it works. You need water for everything. Our lives are tied to water. Our chemical reactions need water. And if you lose even 12%, it causes death. So we need to bring enough water. And I looked up, you can last for months without food, but water, that was the record. I can't even imagine 2 weeks without water, let alone a day, But we can't store it. We're always losing it with every breath, right? Every time we pee, we lose some water. So your body will do what it can to make those kidneys stingy and such. But water is essential that we get it. So our proteins. Proteins, there's so many types. You get it from meat and eggs and fish, and there's plant-based proteins, sure, beans and grains. You get proteins from there. And they work, they work for, your muscle, your skin, your hair, your enzymes, your hemoglobin. They're all proteins. So it makes up your body. There's all the interesting molecules. And we eat protein. And then remember, it's broken down your stomach by pepsin, right? And it's broke down in your intestine, trypsin, and then it's broken down into its amino acids, which are then pumped into the small intestine wall into your bloodstream. And then those amino acids travel in your blood, and your liver can make stuff with them. It can burn them for energy if you have to. It can build proteins. You take in the basic building blocks. There's 20 kinds of amino acids, and you make the proteins with them. You don't store them. You store fat. You don't store these. They're taken in, so you need a continuous supply of proteins in your diet. And just showing you some of the ways we use proteins. So think if you have a protein deficiency. Talked about some people in the world, plenty of rice, but no meat or fish to go with it. And they have real nutritional deficiencies. But all your enzymes, oh my God, that catalyze every reaction in your body. Your hormones, a lot of those are proteins. Your hemoglobin, your muscles are made out of protein. Your antibodies, your hair, your skin. So, all these proteins are critical in your body. And remember the old chemistry here, we're talking about an amino group, a carboxyl group, and then the rest of the molecules, what makes it unique, right? A couple of them have sulfur compounds in it, but yeah, that's an amino acid. That's what your proteins are made out of, and they contain that nitrogen. So you also remember, let's say you take in amino acids through your bloodstream, and then you can make stuff with them. Your body can make stuff with these building blocks, make the proteins. Remember, the recipe is in your DNA, right? And that makes these proteins, and you need all 20 amino acids out there to make your proteins, because it needs to be ready to pull in everyone that it needs. And if let's say you're having a no-carb diet, a low-carb diet, and just eating a lot of protein, well, you can use it for energy too. And you deaminate it, take away the amino group, and that's going to produce that ammonia. And so your body has to get rid of that. It's going to make urea, and you'll pee it out. So a purely protein diet is rough on the kidneys because you make a lot of nitrogenous products that need to be peed out. But yeah, you can use it to make the energy. So 20 amino acids. There's hundreds of amino acids out there, but 20 that life on Earth has used. It's interesting. It shows how all life is related because it's the same 20 in bacteria and us. And we talk about complete proteins having all 20 of those amino acids. Well, no, they have all the essential ones. And the essential ones are the ones that you have to eat, your body can't make. So a non-essential amino acid is one that you still need it, but your body can make it if it wants. It's only essential if it's essential that you eat it in its form because you can't make it yourself. And you notice I crossed out the 8s with 9s. I'll talk about it a little bit, but some controversy there. So complete proteins, meat. I mean, a steak has every amino acid in it. You're taking flesh and making it into flesh. Incomplete proteins are missing at least one of those essential amino acids. And so as a vegetarian, you need to be careful because you're not eating meat that contains all of the amino acids. But you can do it if you mix up different plant products so that you end up having all of them. Yeah, and soybeans, actually, the only plant that has all the amino acids, the essential ones. You don't have to memorize these. For another class, maybe, but these are the 20 amino acids. You see the ones with the dotted lines are the ones that are essential, meaning that you need to eat these. You can't make them. Yeah. Very cool. And so this, again, last semester, I always taught that there was 8 essential, but it looks like that there is, I just want to make sure you guys get the correct information. And you'll see somewhere that it's 9. So 8 or 9 are essential. You need to eat them. And actually in babies, they need 10. There's a couple extra that babies need. Yeah. So meat proteins usually have all the amino acids, no problem. But plants, often incomplete, except for soybeans. So if you're going to eat plants, you need to mix it up so that you have different plants that are going to fill in all the gaps. You have all the essential ones. Yeah, this means children. Yeah, those two are needed when you're young. As an adult, they're not essential. So looking at a vegetarian, and again, some of you out there are. I know some of you are. It's no problem. You'll be careful if your child wants to do it, that they do it correctly. Because a growing body, you need these amino acids to make these proteins. Very important for brain and everything. And it takes a little bit of thought. If you're not going to eat meat, you need to make sure you have a complete diet. And so you can see if you just eat corn, you're not going to have enough tryptophan and lysine. And it'd be okay for days, weeks, I don't know. At some point, you're going to start showing deficiencies because you can't make some of these proteins because you're missing a couple pieces. And beans, they look pretty good, except they're missing that one. But if you eat a corn tortilla with beans, you get all of them. So it's just a matter of being smart enough if you're going to be a vegetarian to make sure you're having a complete diet. And a lot of cultures have figured this out. Looking at beans and rice, things that you mix them together, you have a complete. You get all the essential amino acids. All right, now we talk about nitrogen. I mean, all amino acids, amino has nitrogen in it. So this nitrogen balance is just the idea of looking at a bigger scale. And that usually there's the same amount of nitrogen in is out. And if you're a bodybuilder, you try to build muscle, there's going to be a positive input of nitrogen, right? If you're making a baby, also going to be positive. If you're starving on the other hand, there can be a negative nitrogen balance where you're not taking in enough protein and you're always going to lose some. So nitrogen balance is this idea. What are the requirements? How much protein do you need? Yeah, these vary. People come up with different numbers, but you need proteins, and 10% of a person's diet. Unless you're on an Atkins diet, and then you could be way up there. So it can vary and still be okay, but you need some protein in your diet. And you guys know what happens if you don't have enough protein, right? I showed you some of those starving kids with those swollen bellies. You're going to have edema because you need blood proteins because of osmosis, right? And you can't make antibodies. They're made out of protein. And your skin goes bad and your collagen and everything. So all these proteins need amino acids, and if you are deficient in eating them, you're going to have some serious issues. Yes, showing you nutritional edema, where there's not enough protein so the liver can't make albumin, and the water just leaks out and doesn't get sucked back up. This is torture for those of you that are not eating any carbs, but bread and bagels and pasta, yes. These provide our energy. So carbs include starches and sugars, right? And you all know glucose is our basic energy that we use to make ATP, which is really our basic energy that runs all our chemical reactions, right? So carbs, they fuel us, right? We use all those bonds and all those carbons and hydrogens to get energy in the Krebs cycle, right? And sources, indeed, a lot of our sources from plant starches. We store carbs as glycogen, right? In our muscles, especially in our liver, other tissues. So we always have a store of carbs there. It's not a huge store. If you guys go start working out, you quickly break that down. Or between meals, you break down that glycogen. And then after meals, you build it up again. And if you have an overabundance of carbs, you make it into fats and you store that excess. So yeah, you look at this fire, you realize that is the energy in the carbon bonds in those polysaccharides, those carbohydrates in this wood that we're burning. We're releasing energy all at once. And of course, in our cells, we release it very carefully, and we store it in this rechargeable battery of ATP. Simple sugars. Eat some table sugar, you eat some pixie sticks, some honey, yeah, these things. Monosaccharides going to be these simple sugars. And amazingly, you look at these three, and they have the same chemical formula, C6H12O6, but they vary in their chemical bonds so that they are, in fact, different. And glucose is the one our body really favors, especially your brain really needs the glucose. The other two can be converted into glucose. And fructose, familiar from fruit and honey, has a lot of that. But these are the simple sugars that you absorb into your bloodstream, and they're used very readily by your body. Yeah, in fact, if you eat more complex carbs, decide to eat a oatmeal or a bagel instead of that frosted Krispy Kreme or whatever, the energy is gonna last longer, right? Because you need to break down all those bonds to free the individual monosaccharides. If you eat just pure glucose, that just is directly absorbed. But complex carbs need to be broken down by enzymes in your gut, right? And then fiber is the indigestible parts. These are carbs like cellulose from plants, things that you can't digest. And it's good. Remember I talked about it with colon cancer. It keeps things moving, keeps the bulk of the feces, and it's going to carry some cholesterol with it and keep things moving and healthy. But we don't get any energy from fiber in our food. Yeah, so you can see here all these different carbs. Look at that. Starch is going to be a polysaccharide, big long molecule. Sucrose is table sugar. It's a disaccharide, just has two. These are also disaccharides. Maltose, lactose, again, it's from milk sugar, right? So these things will all be broken down. You can see that to monosaccharides. And then your body absorbs it. And those things can go directly to your cells and be broken down to make your ATP in your mitochondria, right? So monosaccharides go right into the cellular respiration to give you your energy. If you have excess, you can store some as glycogen. So glycogenesis is taking simple sugars that you absorb and storing them. Like I said, especially in your muscle, your liver, it's huge stores of glycogen. And it's just a bunch of glucose strung together in this long chains. And you can also do lipogenesis. These excess carbs can be made into fat, and those go to adipose cells where they're stored. Requirements? Again, some of you are just trying to push getting no carbs at all. There's a lot of thought about that in terms of weight loss. But it provides our energy. And again, we can also get energy from fats and proteins. So it's unknown if there really is a minimum requirement. And if you all remember, here's what a glycogen looks like. It's a whole bunch of glucose molecules, and that is that's the sugar, the carbs you get from eating meat. There's going to be stored glycogen in that steak, that muscle. It's how you store it, glycogen. Yeah. Plant stored as starch. That'll be in that potato, in that wheat, grain, oats, whatever. They're going to store it as starch. And then we can digest starch and make it into the sugars. These two we cannot digest. Cellulose, probably the most common polysaccharide on the planet. It makes up all plants. We cannot digest it. There's bacteria in our gut that can. You say to yourself, well, a cow looks pretty big. How's it surviving on grass? Well, it's using the bacteria in its gut, right? And then you should know chitin too. Chitin is what makes up the shell of insects and crustaceans, lobster, shrimp. So you can swallow a shrimp, eat the shell and all, but the shell part's going to come through you. You're not going to be able to use that for energy because we just don't have enzymes that can clamp on and break it down. It's filled with sugar, both cellulose and chitin. It's just that we don't have cellulase to break down the cellulose. Interestingly, whenever you go on a diet, you're all excited because you lose so much in the beginning, but then you plateau and you get disappointed. And a lot of that initial weight loss is water loss because glycogen, every ounce of glycogen has 4 ounces of water. So you get rid of that, you're going to lose the water early on. And then it gets tougher when you start breaking down the fat. Make sure I know what carbo loading is. It's a real thing. What you do is you don't eat any carbs like a week. just chicken breast, salmon, things like that. And then just before you're going to compete, you eat tons of pasta and bread, tons of carbs. And what you're doing is you're depleting your body of carbs, of that stored glycogen. You're depleting it because you're not giving it those carbs. And so then when you eat all those carbs, your body hoards it and just fills up all this glycogen, even more than normal. And that's the key. It gives you more glycogen, and then you get ready for that competition right away, and then you've got that excess glycogen. It'll give you a little more energy. So if you guys are Office fans like I am, Michael tried to carbo load with pasta Alfredo just before the race. Not how you do it. That's not how it works. But carbo loading is real, and it will give you this excess glycogen to allow you to perform in an endurance sport. And this just shows you the difference, between having simple sugars versus more complex carbs, is that you'll get the energy, quickly, and then you'll kind of crash. If you eat pure sugar, complex starches will give you sugar over a longer period because you've got to break down all those bonds. Here's chitin, perfectly good sugar, but we don't have the enzymes to break it down. Same thing with cellulose. Termites in their gut, they have protozoans, they have bacteria that break it down, but we can't break down cellulose. So you eat a salad, the lettuce part, you get a lot of fiber, and you get water and nutrients too, and sugars and fruit, things like that, but we can't break down the cell walls of plants. All right, we've come now to lipids, fats. Now lipids have twice the energy, the calories per weight, more than twice, than proteins or carbs. So this, if you're talking about how to get the most calories, go for the lipids, because pound per pound, they've got the most calories. And so humans, we have evolved to love fats, donuts and chips and fries, because that it makes us happy because we're getting the calories. And that was good back in a time when calories were at a premium for survival. Today's society, when there's a glut of food, we're left with this love of fat, yet we eat too much of it because it's too available. I digress. So we store fat all throughout our bodies, behind our eye, under our skin, on our guts, everywhere. Everywhere you store fat. And sources, of course, butter, oils, eggs, things that have that fat in them. And we do store fat. So we store fat. We don't store amino acids, and carbs we store briefly, but fats is our storage for our calories. This brings me back to Iowa. There was a bar. It was like a 70s themed bar. It had just old time beer and shag carpet, and it's pretty fun. And this sadly, I ate this. Yeah, this is a particular lipid-laden meal right here. The powdered donut doesn't help, but you've got cheese and bacon and sausages and more cheese. And so, yeah, delicious, delicious. But that thing is loaded with a lot of fat, a lot of calories. This I found on the internet. I think it's interesting to look at morbid obesity. See the amount of fat stored on the human frame. And necessary. Around our kidneys, we have tons of fat. And in our eyes, we have fat that's cushioning back there. So we often see in starvation, you'll see sunken eyes, and the kidneys will be more mobile because normally you have fat holding them in. Under our skin, it's a beautiful insulating, especially in whales and seals. They have a huge layer of fat that's going to store calories, but also provide insulation to the blood inside. Now in the fat world, I want to make sure you guys are clear on this. I think a lot of you, you're into nutrition, you understand this, but saturated fats are the bad guys, are the ones that will stick to your arteries, cause more heart disease, and you find it in lard and butter and eggs and cheese and things like that. And what it means to be saturated means that the tails are straight because all the carbons have hydrogens coming off of them. Well, I'll show you, because unsaturated means that there's a double bond in there. If you have a double bond, remember carbons want 4 bonds. And so if you take away a hydrogen, you're going to form a double bond. And it's places with double bonds causes that molecule to kink, causes it to bend. And so it's not saturated because it's not completely filled with hydrogens. You've got a double bond in there. And you could have monounsaturated or polyunsaturated, right? And it can even depend where that double bond is. Talk about omega-3 fatty acids and omega-6. 3 is healthier than 6. Depends on the third carbon, 6 carbon. So all these things are, there's all kinds of lipids out there. I think it's like 600 kinds of lipids in a lipid panel in a human. Don't quote me on that, but the difference here is that saturated fats are usually animal origin, and they've got straight fatty tails. The unsaturated, they kinked, so they're not as dense. So saturated fats are often solid at room temperature. Like you cook a steak and the next morning that pan is like white at room temperature. Or you have coconut oil on your shelf and it's in the summer it's liquid, in the winter it's white solid. So it's when it turns into a solid, it means that those tails are straight. You can pack them in more densely. Than unsaturated, like olive oil, you can't. It'll never turn solid in normal temperatures because they can't get that close because the tails are kinked and they can't stack up as much. What happens? Our fats are often triglycerides. You've got a glycerol and you've got 3 long fatty acid chains. Remember, those have to be broken down by lipases in our gut, and the glycerol, that'll be absorbed. You can turn that into glucose pretty easy, and the 3 fatty acids are absorbed separately in there. And then what do? Well, we can make all kinds of lipids, and your liver is big at that. You can make triglycerides to go out and go to fat cells to be stored, phospholipids to make up cell membranes. You can go ahead and burn them for energy if you need to. We'll talk about cholesterol here in a minute. And so, like chocolate chip cookies, you've all been there where you don't have the butter and you're like, oh gosh, I just need the butter or the egg. But the butter we're talking about here. So you use oil, it just comes out different consistency. It's still freaking good, but it's just not, doesn't have the chewiness. So what gives our food its texture and taste has to do with how saturated the fats are, definitely. And so food scientists really work at this to get the fats just right. And they end up doing things where they take perfectly healthy, unsaturated fat, they saturate it. They call it hydrogenated. Remember, unsaturated means it's missing a hydrogen, so it has a double bond. They freaking bubble hydrogen, and then they make the fat into these Frankenfats, these different fats that they want to give that taste where the chocolate melts in your mouth, not in your hand, and it gives that smooth, it lasts longer on the shelf. And so we do that. And by making these hydrogenated fats, we came up with a really bad guy, these trans fats. So I was just showing hydrogenation. So we fool with the fats to make the food that we like. And trans fats are when you hydrogenate it and it bends in the trans instead of the cis position. So it's a different bend that's unnatural in the human body, and it's really been linked to heart disease. And so they've banned it. It depends on the country. I'm not sure what the schedule is, but you won't see a lot of trans fats, but you used to see, trans fat in a bag of chips. And then I think I remember talking about this last semester, but Olestra, we came up with, this is the holy grail. It's a fat that makes it taste good on your mouth, but you can't absorb it. Well, that not absorbing it is a problem because it's going to come out one way or another, right? So we came up with this Olestra. You can see the long chains, but it's kind of like a Medusa instead of being these long 3 parallel chains. And sure, it had a good taste, but advertisers were forced to put on there, may cause anal leakage. And that really puts a damper on selling a lot of those cookies or chips, right? So turns out you can eat small amounts, but if you eat a lot of it, it does cause some intestinal distress. So we still don't have that artificial fat that's just like fat, but we don't have any issues with it. Cholesterol. Of course, you hear it, being the bad guy, you eat too many eggs and bacon, you get a lot of cholesterol. Cholesterol is only found in the cell membranes of animals, so you don't get it from plant products, but you get it from animals. And it's necessary. Every freaking cell in your body has cholesterol in the cell membrane. It stabilizes it and it's necessary. But too much cholesterol tends to make plaques in your arteries, right? And just so you remember, all your steroid hormones from your adrenal cortex and your estrogen testosterone, cortisol. These are all steroid hormones. Use cholesterol as the backbone. And so you need cholesterol to make these steroid hormones. And we store excess calories as fat. No matter what you're bringing in, you eat proteins, carbs, or fat, it can be stored as fat. And it does take energy to make it into a storage form, but when you look at the register, the math at one end, if you take in too much, you're going to store it. Overall, there's going to be a net increase over time. Yeah, so you can break down fats, and again, glycerol, I said, you can turn that right into sugar. And then the fatty acids, they can go right into the citric acid cycle, the Krebs cycle there, to acetyl-CoA. And just one thing I guess I want to bring up here is that because I talked about diabetic ketoacidosis, if you in fact burn fats only, and so this happens if you're starving and you're just using your fat, or certain diets, or if you're diabetic, where your cells need to burn fat because insulin is what allowed sugar to come in, and it's either resistant or you don't have enough insulin. So you can get diabetic ketoacidosis. So by burning fats, you make ketone bodies, and it's okay in small amounts, but when it builds up, you're going to become more and more acidic. Exactly. So ketoacidosis is an issue with starvation or diabetes, where you become so acidic because a byproduct of burning these fats is that you make these acetone and other ketone bodies. What are the requirements for how much fat do you need to eat? Some people, it makes up half of their calories. Talking here, shouldn't exceed 30. So you should be getting a lot of your calories from carbs and proteins. There are a couple essential ones you need to get. Linoleic, two, I think, essential. So you need that in your diet. Nobody has a real issue getting those in a normal diet. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about LDL, HDL. You guys are a little young out there, but I take a statin, simvastatin, because I had a high LDL to HDL ratio. Taking it for years, there's no effects other than it tells my liver to decrease my LDL. It's nothing to do with my diet. It's telling my liver to control this. And your liver controls the fats. Which fats are made, which fats are delivering fat to the tissues, etc. And just, if you know, LDL is the bad one. And this stands for how dense they are. So low density lipoprotein or high density lipoprotein. There's even a very high density lipoprotein too, a VHDL. But these two are checked when you guys do a blood panel. And they have to do, the more protein you have, the more dense it's going to be. Fats are not dense. So the difference is you look at an LDL, it's carrying a lot of fat, and HDL has a lot of protein in relation to each other. So this ratio is looked at when you want to look at someone's cholesterol levels if you're worried about cardiovascular disease. Yep. Cool. Again, look at the calories. You can see per gram, lipids have the most energy. Ooh, excess is a deficiency. Interesting. So obviously obesity will be excess of any of them. Again, you can have no fat in your diet and get obese. It's not because your body can make fats. See, not enough carbs. Oh yeah, that acidosis because you're burning fats. Exactly. Not enough lipids. Oh, you give your dog oil and fat so they have a shiny coat. Yeah, so I see skin issues and weight loss if you don't get enough lipids. And then proteins. Oh yeah. Anemia because you can't make hemoglobin, it's a protein. Yeah. Growth problems because you need it to build bones and muscles. Let's talk about how many calories you burn. And I read somewhere it's about a normal light bulb is amount of energy. This is your basal metabolic rate, your BMR. That is just if you are laying there just breathing. You're not digesting, you're not thinking about stuff, you're just, how many calories do you use? I know as males a little bit higher than females. Interesting. And then that basal is if you do nothing. But as soon as you stand up, you're above that, right? So your actual daily energy usage is going to be, You can see 50 to 100% more than that. And if you're training for a marathon, it could be, a lot more than that. So this is how much calories you need. And a calorie. So a calorie is, they use a calorimeter to figure it out. What you do is you take a known volume of water and you put the sample in this little dish, and then you burn that sample, little wires go in there, and it releases all the energy in that sample, and it heats up the water around it. Very sensitive instruments measure how much heat, and that'll tell you how many calories was in that sample. And again, a small calorie is the amount of energy to raise 1 milliliter of water 1 degree Celsius. And a big C is what you see on your candy bars. That's 1,000 of those. And showing you some activities. Boy, those stairs. Wow, that's amazing. Stairs, oh yeah. That's why I had you guys walk the stairs, try to get your heart rate up. You can see that. Sitting at rest, yeah, still basally just sitting upright is going to use energy. All right, I'm going to finish this lecture up and talk about vitamins here. So vitamins, minerals will be inorganic, but vitamins will be organic compounds. And you need them. They're essential for normal life's functioning. It means you can't make them yourself. And so we're going to split them into 2 big groups. You'll see there's the water soluble, and for this class, I'm not going to get into the detail. In your book, you don't have to memorize that chart. But the vitamin C and then the B vitamins, niacin, riboflavin, we'll throw those all together. I'll talk about B12 specifically, and then fat soluble, and especially talk about A, D, and vitamin K. So those you can OD on, the fat soluble, because you store those in your fat. Water soluble, you pee those out. Those will be in the water. So taking a look in some of your nutrition, you know the difference between B2, B6, B12. I'm not going to get into it that much, but one thing about these things is that these vitamins, that what we call vitamins, are because humans need those. And it's different in your cat, your dogs. Just realize that. People tend to think this is for all life or all mammals, but no. You can see, primates, guinea pigs, and fruit bats. So for them, they need vitamin C. But your dog doesn't need vitamin C because it can make it itself. So it just depends how we evolved as what is actually essential for us compared to other animals. All right, the next lecture we will finish this with minerals and talk about some more topics.